One step leads to another, which leads to a door, which leads to discover real what freedom really means when uncovered. So here's the one step that leads to another. My brother once told a magazine writer that me and Jay Elect made hip-hop's future lighter.
What's going on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music. Today I want to talk about this record right here. This is Big Tone and House Shoes, Big Shoes, released on Street Corner Music in 2019. I was really looking forward to checking this project out. I was already a fan of Big Tone through his collaborative track that he did for House Shoes' Let It Go album released back in 2012. That was a big highlight track for me. I really liked Big Tone's rapping on it, and I really liked House Shoes' production on that track. So after hearing that track, I was really interested to hear what a full-length project from these two would end up sounding like. So now that I've given this record quite a few listens, I'm going to share my thoughts and opinions of this record with you guys, and let you know whether or not I think it's worth checking out. So with that being said, yeah, let's talk about this guy. So a little bit of background about these two. I can't really say that much about Big Tone other than I know he's a veteran of the Detroit hip-hop scene. House Shoes I got a little bit more to say about because I've been a big fan of him for a long time. I think my first introduction to House Shoes was hearing him talk about Rough Draft when it was being reissued on Stone's Throw. And through that I started getting into some of his DJ mixes, some of his radio stuff, listening to a lot of interviews with him. He's very opinionated, so he's always interesting to listen to, and ultimately sort of falling in love with a lot of his production stuff. I feel like House Shoes is sort of underappreciated when it comes to his actual beat making skills. So many of his productions are really hard hitting and don't really do the whole sort of Jay Dilla swing stuff so much as he just goes for the hardest hitting stompers that you can possibly imagine. And a lot of that production style is really apparent on his 2012 album, Let It Go, which I do recommend that you check out. So now that I've gushed quite a bit about House Shoes as a producer, how do I feel about this album as a whole? I kind of went into this album with, I'd say, like reasonably tempered expectations. The few tracks that I'd heard from it, like From My Mouth to God's Ears and No Guest List, I really enjoyed. I like the sort of ominous atmosphere and the sort of weird, different, clicky style drums that House Shoes employs on that track. From My Mouth to God's Ears actually features a beat from House Shoes single that came out years ago. So I was already familiar with the instrumental on that, and I really liked Big Tone's rapping on those two tracks. There's a lot of forcefulness, conviction. What he raps about, whether it's about the come up or trying to make it in the world of rap, I really feel like there's a lot of conviction and that he's really going through the things that he talks about. On some of the more braggy stuff, like on No Guest List, Big Tone comes with tons of confidence, tons of bravado and braggadocio, and I just really like the way that he sounds on it. Quelle Chris does a guest verse on that track as well, and I think Quelle Chris just adds to the overall vibe of the track. So honestly, I gotta say, this is one of my favorite hip-hop records of this year, between Bandana and A Red Hot Los Angeles Summer Night, and as of this moment, I would put this guy at the top of the list. I absolutely love this record. From the two tracks that I just talked about, all of my descriptions of Big Tone's style holds true throughout the entire record. There isn't a weak performance from Big Tone at all. He's consistently powerful. There's a certain punch to the way that he flows, and I really get the feeling that when he talks about some of the struggles and some of the hurdles that he's had to go through in the rap game, especially on the opener Autobiography, I really honestly believe that he is telling the truth when it comes to tracks like that. And speaking of tracks like Autobiography, which is such an odd track since it doesn't have any drums on it, yet House Shoes' very crazily chopped, shimmery synth sample that he uses on that track somehow still ends up working, which leads into High Velocity, which is easily one of the biggest neck breakers on the record. Part 2, especially in the second half of the track, just gets even harder and more menacing than the way that it kicks off with. There really isn't a weak track on here. From front to back, this is consistently the most interesting and the most engaging, and honestly just my favorite favorite hip-hop record of this year. All the guests on here, that Mark Vesey, Mosel, Quelle Chris, Tarash and 87, Jametta Rose, and Blue all turn in stellar performances. I really like the track Haze with Jametta Rose, which sort of switches the vibe up and shows that Big Tone can also have a softer and more romantic side to his lyrics. And I think they do a great job complementing each other, with Big Tone sort of toning things down and Jametta Rose bringing her soulful vocals to the mix, which then leads into my favorite track of the album, Beautiful Mind, featuring Blue. Is honestly one of my favorite tracks of the year. When I first listened to this record, that literally made me jump out of my seat and say, holy shit. House Shoes' production on this track is some of the hardest hitting, neck snapping, throw someone down the stairs kind of shit that I just think that House Shoes ends up doing better than anyone. And there's just this beautiful sort of rising tension with Big Tone's delivery that just continues to get harder and more passionate, that just matches the rising tension of the track so perfectly that I don't think that there's a better moment in hip-hop in 2019 than that track. On the production side of things, House Shoes definitely holds up his end of the deal and ends up turning in some of my favorite House Shoes productions I've heard to date. All the stuff on here is House Shoes at his best. Some real head nodders, some really stomp heavy tracks that just have some of the heaviest kicks and snares that I've heard all year. There's a certain just way that House Shoes does this style that's so different from a lot of other beat makers out there that just sort of focus on making that sort of J Dilla swing. And I love how House Shoes uses a lot of different sampling sources as well. Instead of just going with straight up soul samples, he employs a lot of weird synths, a lot of sort of progressive rock sounds, and ultimately gives you a pretty varied set of tracks on here where nothing really sounds the same. And I gotta say, honestly, I don't really have any complaints with this record. Big Tone's performance on here across the board is excellent. House Shoes' beats on here across the board are excellent. So yeah, this is probably my favorite hip-hop record of the year. Can't recommend it enough. If you haven't checked out Big Tone and House Shoes, highly recommended, and easily one of my favorite records of 2019. So that's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you've given this record a listen, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. If you want to check this record out for yourself, please head over to my WordPress or Steemit blogs. That's where I'll post music links to this and any of the videos that I talk about on this channel. And as always, please head over to my Mixcloud so you can check out Raw Select Radio, basically the audio component of this whole thing. Links to everything, as always, down in the description. So that's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. So until then, peace out!